Okay, so buckle up. We're diving into the deeply disturbing case of David Parker Ray today, what they call the toy box killer. Oof, it's a tough one, but we're going to try to, wrap our heads around how someone could do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
We've been digging into Ray's past, looking at what we know about sadism, even got excerpts from this tape, this awful tape he made for his victims.
Right.
It's a lot to process, but I don't know, just trying to grasp the psychology of someone like Ray, it feels,
Yeah,
I don't know, important, even if it's the opposite of a good time.
definitely. I mean, the more we understand about these extreme cases, the better chance we have maybe of seeing the warning signs, preventing more tragedies like this.
Exactly. So let's start at the beginning. What do we know about Ray's early life?
Well, he was born in New Mexico in '39, and his childhood, well, troubled, might be putting it mildly.
Yeah, I was reading about that. Unstable family, abuse,
Oh, yeah.
reports of exposure to violent pornography when he was way too young.
Very young, and that's a whole other conversation.
Right, of course. And we're definitely not trying to excuse his actions here, not at all. But it makes you wonder, like, how much can those early experiences actually, shape someone? Their psyche, their capacity for hurting other people.
It's complicated, right? But we do see some patterns with this level of sadism. Take the cycle of abuse theory, for instance. It suggests that if you experience violence, especially as a kid, you're statistically more likely to become violent yourself.
Makes sense.
So in Ray's case, you have physical abuse, plus that early exposure to violent sexual content. I mean, it's horrifying to think about, but it's possible that combination really messed with his sense of what's normal, like warped his boundaries.
Like his internal compass was totally out of whack from the get-go.
Exactly. And then you add in the reports of him being bullied, struggling socially.
Right.
Those things are common, but still, they can really fuel this need for power, for control, that in his case took a very, very dark turn.
And then that brings us to the toy box.
Ugh.
Just saying it. It's this soundproofed torture chamber, basically, that he built.
Yeah.
Inside a trailer. Restraints, whips, surgical instruments. Like, it's the stuff of nightmares.
It's beyond disturbing.
That level of premeditation, though, like he thought this whole thing out. He designed it. What does that say about him? I mean, psychologically?
To me, the toy box, it shows you just how much Ray needed to be in control, like total domination. This wasn't just about hurting someone in the moment. It was about orchestrating every single detail of their pain, every aspect of their suffering.
And as if that wasn't bad enough, the physical torture, it's like he was also messing with his victims' minds. Like he had all these calculated psychological tactics.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where it gets even more disturbing. Before the victims even saw him, he'd make them listen to these tapes, sometimes for days.
What?
Yeah, like nonstop. These recordings, it was completely intentional. It was a way to break them down, make them afraid, make them more likely to obey, all before the physical torture even started.
We actually have a clip from one of those tapes.
Yeah.
And just a warning to our listeners, this is really disturbing.
It's rough. Audio excerpt from Ray's tape, focusing on the themes of control, obedience, and punishment, but avoiding overly graphic or offensive language.
God. Just chilling.
Yeah.
The things he says, it's like he doesn't even see them as people.
Right, like they're not even human to him.
Calling them slaves.
Yeah.
Threatening punishment, talking about torture, like it's nothing. Just horrifying.
And the worst part is it's so calculated. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment thing. He planned this. He scripted it. He wanted to inflict as much mental anguish as possible.
And if the physical and psychological torture wasn't enough, he drugged them too.
Yeah, that's where it gets even more sinister. He used sodium pentothal sometimes and phenobarbital.
I know those names from somewhere.
Sodium pentothal is a sedative. People call it truth serum, but honestly, it's not as reliable as TV makes it seem. And phenobarbital, that's a barbiturate. They use it to treat things like anxiety or seizures. But for Ray, it was just another way to control people.
So he wasn't just trying to, overpower them physically. He was trying to wipe their memories.
Exactly. Two really awful purposes, really. First, it made it hard for victims to remember what happened. Makes it hard to report, hard to give details to the police. But then the second thing, and this is just, it's beyond messed up, it created a whole other level of trauma. Can you imagine surviving something that awful, but only having these fragmented, confusing memories? That kind of psychological torment could go on for years, even after the physical stuff was over.
It's heartbreaking. To heal from something you can't even fully remember.
It's one of the cruelest things about cases like this, and it's why we have to understand just how bad this all was and how deeply it impacted his victims.
It's just, I don't know, mind-blowing. The level of planning, Using drugs not just to overpower someone, but to control their memories, too. That's just a whole other level of messed up.
It really is, and it makes these cases so much harder to prosecute, and for the victims to heal. How do you even begin to get justice for something you can barely remember? How do you even start to process that kind of trauma?
Exactly. And the thing is, Ray, he got away with this for years. Years of this calculated cruelty. All those victims.
And that's why the story of Cynthia Vigil is so important. So it's 1999, and she's been held captive in the toy box for 3 days.
3 days.
And somehow she manages to escape.
Yeah, it's incredible. Ray and his girlfriend, Cindy Handy, we'll get to her later, they were gone, and Cynthia, she was able to get free.
She literally ran for her life, still wearing this metal collar.
I can't even imagine.
But she got away. And because of her bravery, Ray was finally caught.
It's a testament to, like, the strength of the human spirit, to survive something like that. And then to be able to contact the police, go through all of that again with the authorities. I mean, just to face her tormentor.
Absolutely. And not only did she save herself, but who knows how many other women she saved from going through the same thing.
This is a good reminder, even in the worst possible situation, there's still hope.
There is. And Cynthia's case, it brings up something else we need to talk about with these kinds of crimes accomplices. Like Cindy Hendy, Ray's girlfriend.
God, that's the other thing. I mean, how can someone be a part of something like that?
Yeah.
What do we actually know about her? What was her role?
Well, from what we know, Hendy, she didn't just stand by and watch. She was involved in the abductions, the torture.
Oh, well,
She was an active participant.
so she wasn't forced
Yeah.
or manipulated into it. It sounds like she was into it.
It's tough to say for sure, and honestly, we may never know the full story there, but one thing we do see in these kinds of relationships is how twisted the power dynamics can get.
Yeah.
It's disturbing.
It's terrifying. It's like a reminder that, the monsters, they don't always look like monsters, right?
Mm.
Sometimes they can be hiding in plain sight, manipulating the people around them into doing unspeakable things. God, it's just so much.
Yeah.
The way he planned everything out, the way he manipulated everyone. And the fact that he was able to do all of this for so long and nobody knew.
And that's the thing, right? He kept going for years. Years. He documented everything. Like, he actually wrote a whole manual about his plans. But somehow he stayed under the radar.
It's terrifying, really, how many other victims are out there. People who might not even know what happened to them because of the drugs.
That's the hardest part of cases like this. We know Ray was active for at least a decade, and we know he went after women who were vulnerable, maybe estranged from their families or struggling with addiction, people who are less likely to be reported missing. Or if they are, maybe the police don't look as hard.
God, that just makes it even worse. Like, even though he was caught in 99, even though he was convicted, sentenced to over 200 years,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like enough. It doesn't feel like justice. Not for something like this.
I hear you. There's never really closure. Not in cases like this. We'll probably never know how many victims there really were, how much he really did.
It's awful. Yeah. And I think it shows how important it is to, to really pay attention, to listen to survivors, support people who've experienced trauma, especially when it's something like this. When someone's been manipulated, when their memories are messed with, it makes it that much harder to come forward.
Exactly. And the more we understand about how these predators think, what they do, how it affected their victims, the better chance we have of stopping something like this from happening again.
Well, this has been a heavy one. A seriously disturbing look into, like, the darkest parts of what people are capable of.
Yeah.
But, I keep thinking about Cynthia Vigil, her escape, the fact that she was brave enough to come forward. It gives me hope,
Me too. And I think that's what we need to hold on to. Even in the face of something this dark, there's still that strength, that resilience, that hope.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this deep dive. It was a lot, but I think it was important. Sometimes you have to face the darkness to really appreciate the light,